Hello, everyone. I'm Father Philip Smith. I serve as Director of the Office for Diocesan Priestly Vocations for the Diocese of Toledo. God has called each of us to a special mission, a special role in His plan of salvation. And my ministry is focused on helping those called to the priesthood to understand that call and to prepare for that call. I mentor the 15 seminarians who are currently studying to become priests for the Diocese of Toledo, and also travel throughout the diocese, meeting with young adults, young men in particular, to see if God's calling them to the priesthood, to encourage them to think about a priestly vocation, and to those who are called, to help them respond with an open heart. I was born and raised here in our diocese, in the town of Tiffin, Ohio. And the first time I really thought I knew what I was supposed to do with my life was actually when I was about second grade. And that was, in my mind, a call to become the quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. That's what I thought my vocation would be. That's what I thought I would do with my life. That's what my dream was. But it was probably about 5th or 6th grade when the idea of priesthood came into my mind. I was an altar server. I was involved in my parish. And the idea of priesthood was there. But even at that time, I probably was still thinking honestly about becoming the quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. Life continued, got into high school, went to a Catholic high school, and there was 2 priest chaplains, good priests, who encouraged me to think about it. Once during my freshman year and then another during my junior year. And I really was not that excited about a call to the priesthood. The idea was still there. But I didn't say yes to those priests who encouraged me to think about it. One even took me to visit a seminary, and I said, no thanks, I'm going to go to college and do my own thing. But it was when I was in college that I realized that this idea of priesthood that I had thought about since middle school hadn't gone away. And while I was really happy in a lot of ways of what I was doing in life, there was something unsettled inside of me. I felt this tug to consider the priesthood. I remember going to a priest and kind of asking him what I should do. I was trying to get some clarity, trying to work through this kind of confusion I felt within myself. And I remember he taught me a very simple prayer. It was 8 words, and that really helped me gain the clarity I needed in my call. It was very simple. It changed my life. He asked me to pray every day, Lord, help me to want what you want. So I'd pray those 8 words every single day. Lord, help me to want what you want. As I began praying that prayer, Lord, help me to want what you want, I realized I needed to open myself to the possibility that God might be calling me to the priesthood. I realized that the God who made me had a better idea of how to help me be happy in this life than I could designing my own plans for my future. I realized that perhaps my own plans were too limited, they were too short-sighted. They were too focused on me being where I was comfortable. Whereas God's plan is usually a plan that stretches us, leads us beyond where we're comfortable, encourages us to leave behind what's easy and most familiar to us and to set out into the unknown and the great adventure that God has planned for each one of us. And so I decided that, I needed to give priesthood a try. I needed to at least go to seminary, and I kind of assumed I would go to seminary, I would hate it, and then I would move on with my life and do my own thing. Of course, as God plans work, as I went to seminary, I experienced peace. I experienced joy. There was a stability in what I was doing. That unsettledness that I had experienced before began to wane away. And I realized that, yes, this was what God was calling me to. Well, at a certain level, I thought maybe God's plan for me would be unveiled in kind of dramatic ways, hear about saints who heard voices from heaven or something like that. I realized that this gentle tug that I had felt in my heart from the time I was 5th grade, 6th grade, was actually God's call. Sometimes God's inspirations are very simple. They're not dramatic or overwhelming necessarily. Oftentimes they just take place in the quiet of our hearts. And so the more I prayed with it, the more I was open to God's plan, more I realized that, yes, this was my call. This is what God was calling me to do. Here in our diocese, we need more priests. We need more priests to serve our parishes. And so there's several practical things each one of us can do to make sure we have priests to serve our diocese. And the first thing is for all of us is to pray for an increase of vocations. vocations in particular to priesthood. We also need religious sisters. We need vocations to religious life. You see, in the gospel, Jesus told us one thing to do for more vocations to ministry in the church. He told us to pray. He said the harvest is abundant, but the laborers are few. So beg the master of the harvest to send laborers into the vineyard. We need to beg God to send us priests. Our prayers make a difference. I mentioned earlier that I grew up in a small town, a town of about 18,000 people, just 2 Catholic churches in the town. And in the mid-1990s, there was concerted effort at these parishes to begin praying for vocations. There was Eucharistic adoration once a week for vocations in each parish in the town. And I can tell you those prayers, while it took time, have borne fruit. In the past 10 years, from 2011 to 2021, there's been 5 men ordained to the priesthood from those 2 small parishes. There's been many men who've gone to seminary. There's been a seminarian in seminary every year since 2005 from the city of Tiffin, this small little town. Prayers for vocations can make a difference. It's important that we're persistent, that we're patient. A vocation takes much time to unfold. But if we beg God for vocations, there will be priests to serve our church in the future. A second practical way we can increase the amount of vocations in our diocese is to live our faith passionately in whatever our vocation might be. Whether we're called to married life or the single life, whether we're priests or we're sisters. If we live our faith passionately, that'll give young people a reason to consider giving their life to serve church. Sacrificing all the wonderful pleasures this world offers us, or many of them, to sacrifice those to serve the church only makes sense if our Catholic faith is true, if it's the most important priority in our life. If our relationship with Jesus is worth sacrificing for, that type of attitude, that type of lifestyle, lived out by all of us in our parishes, that's what's going to create a climate where young people will be open to the possibility that God is calling them to this way of life. If our faith is our first priority, we're making attending Sunday Mass, serving other people, being involved in the community life of our parish, including all the tensions and challenges that entails. That's how we live our everyday life. That gives young people reason to pause and to say, maybe I need to make my faith more of a priority. Maybe I need to grow closer to Jesus. And by growing closer to Jesus, that's how they're going to hear God's call. Everything we can do to help our young people get close to Jesus is what's going to create the place for them to hear his voice, inviting them to come follow him in whatever their vocation might be. It's important that we live our faith passionately in whatever our vocation is, because that's what's going to create the place where young people hear God's voice. A third practical way for us to increase the amount of vocations in our diocese, for each and every one of us, to be encouraging of young people, to consider the possibility that God might be calling them to priesthood or religious life, or to live the vocation of Christian marriage or the dedicated single life. In my own work, I oftentimes encounter 2 extremes. Young people sometimes are discouraged from priesthood. Their closest family members or their friends. Their family members, even if they're sometimes are very dedicated Catholics, don't want their child to serve the church in this way. Perhaps they have a different career in mind for them, a different life plan. Maybe they want grandchildren. Maybe they want their child to stay closer to home. Oftentimes parents have their own dreams for their children. And you need to be open to the possibility that God may have something different in mind for their child or their grandchild. The other extreme, of course, are those who are pressuring their kids to become priests or to become sisters. I sometimes work with young adults who have a mom or a grandma or grandfather who perhaps is trying to almost bully them into becoming a priest. And that's not healthy either. God gives us freedom. So he gently invites us to be open to what his plan is for us. And so that's the attitude we should take. When we see a young adult who's active in their faith, it doesn't hurt to encourage them to think about the possibility that perhaps God's inviting them to become a priest. In my own life, it was those two priests when I was in high school who were God's instruments, who helped encourage me to perhaps see in myself a vocation that they already saw in me. By making those gentle invitations, not bullying them, not pressuring them, just inviting them, can be a place, again, where God's grace can work, where young adults can hear God's voice and be open to the possibility that God's calling them to become a priest. I invite all of you, as we think about vocations, to give thanks for the vocation we've each received. God's called each of us to do something special in this world. Sometimes our vocation might not seem very significant. Sometimes we might feel in the midst of the daily grind that what we're doing in terms of our daily prayer and our service and our life and our career, even the time we spend at home, doesn't mean that much in God's plan. Our Catholic faith teaches us that if we live our faith well, if we live our life for God, if we do everything we do with great love for God each day, our life will help other people experience the salvation Jesus wants to offer to them. As we offer our lives to God, as we pray for an increase in vocations of the priesthood and religious life, as we witness to the beauty of a life lived totally for God and whatever our vocation might be, as we encourage young people to consider a vocation to the priesthood or religious life, we should trust that God will work, provide many laborers for his harvest, serve our church in the Diocese of Toledo. I thank you as vocation director for all your prayers, for your witness, and pray that God will bless us with many vocations so that our church may be alive, that people may experience the sacraments through the priesthood, especially the gift of the Holy Eucharist, so that our faith may grow and others may experience God's great love for them.